Welcome to the Genetics Podcast. I'm Patrick, the co-founder and CEO of Sano Genetics, and I'm really excited to be here today with Allison Watson, who's the co-founder and secretary of the Ring 20 Research and Support UK patient organization, and she's also co-chair of EpiCARE's patient advisory group, which we'll get into later, but it's part of a European reference network that's dedicated towards providing care for rare disease patients across Europe. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today, Allison.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today.
Yeah, of course. So I was hoping maybe we could get started by you just telling a little bit of your story about how you came into your role as a parent of a child with a rare disorder, and also your role in advocacy and policy in this area.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So my story, I guess, starts with my son David, who was my second child and appeared to be born perfectly normally, reached his first milestones just as he should have done, seemingly very normal childhood development. And then when he was 6 years old, one morning we'd been out the night before and we found him slumped in his bedroom, looking like a listless rag doll, unable to speak or move. And we rushed him off to A&E because we couldn't get him to respond to us. And after some various tests, the doctor said to us, we think he's had a seizure. And we'd really not heard about epilepsy before. So we were, extremely concerned and worried what was happening to our son. However, after an initial proposed seizure, your child is not necessarily diagnosed with epilepsy, but we underwent some tests, EEGs, both privately and through the NHS, because we wanted answers, as many worried parents do. And I remember one of the neurologists saying to us, perfectly normal brain for a 6-year-old, when he gave us the results of the EEG. However, over the next sort of 6 months, David's condition started to deteriorate. He started to do some strange things. He used to sit down at a little chair painting or colouring or whatever, and then he'd just bolt off out of the room for no reason, as if he was after something, but there was no reason to go. And he just did some very peculiar things that were out of context. And then about 6 months later, he started to have seizures every few hours, out of absolutely nowhere. We had a very sudden and severe onset of seizures, and they were quite unusual. They weren't tonic-clonic seizures, so he didn't fall on the floor and shake, but he would start to shout out and stiffen his arms and make some peculiar verbal sort of noises, and these increased in frequency from every few hours to more than hourly. He was eventually, within a week or so, having 25, 30 seizures every 24 hours. And we had him, took him in via A&E, who initially wanted to dismiss us to go and talk to a patient and a family and child support group, because they thought my child was just having nightmares. But we just kind of knew there's that family parent instinct that something is really wrong with your child, but you don't know what. And David was taken in for some further testing, and the lovely paediatrician believed that he had epilepsy and started to treat him for that. What we eventually found out was that his seizures were actually due to a rare chromosome disorder. He was actually referred to Great Ormond Street Hospital from the local paediatrician because his seizures were just getting more and more frequent, more and more severe. And the drugs that they were treating him with, the usual anti-epileptic drugs, he was just not responding at all. He was getting worse. And we were referred to a specialist centre. and they actually put him on a course of steroids, which seemed to calm the seizures to some degree, and they had quite significant effect actually in calming everything down within a few weeks. It was a very short, sharp course. But they had no idea of the cause of David's epilepsy, and it was only a couple of years later when we were at the local paediatrician that she said to us, "Oh, David's got a slightly small head and a little bit sticky out ears." And we thought, well, he's a 7-8-year-old little boy, you know, not very different to any other little boy out there. But she said, I'm going to do some tests. And little did we know, and little did she know, that the result that came back was Ring Chromosome 20 syndrome, which is a very ultra rare epilepsy that she had never heard of before. Obviously, we hadn't. And it gave some level of explanation for his seizures. We were referred to a genetic counsellor, and we got some level of information, but because it's such an ultra rare disease, there was very limited of information available. However, there was at that time a patient support group that we were signposted to, that operated out of the UK and the US at the time. And we were able to get in contact with other families who were affected by the condition, and to be able to share some experiences, to actually talk to somebody who was going through what we were going through, and ask each other lots of questions but maybe not find the answers, because there's no recommended treatment for this condition. It's treatment on a trial and error basis, and actually it's a very refractory or difficult to treat epilepsy, so it typically just doesn't respond to any treatments. So we stuck with the patient organisation for a number of years, which was incredibly helpful. But that, for unforeseen circumstances, that patient organisation eventually folded and closed. And we realised very much that family support was incredibly valuable. We found out so much information through channels that the organisation signposted us to, and through talking to other families, that we determined, myself and my colleague Donald Gordon, who was originally involved in the other organisation, we decided that we would need to set up a new patient organisation to reconnect families with Ring 20, or R20 as we call it for short. So we set about setting up our own charity, a completely new charity from scratch, to connect families and try to establish connections with healthcare professionals that had an interest in the condition, to see whether we could heighten awareness and start to move towards a better understanding of the condition and the disease, and try to think about how we could improve the quality of life and the treatment for our loved ones and all the families that we support. So that's what we set about doing just over 5 years ago. About 5.5 years ago, we officially formed as a charity. So we're relatively new, quite small. We operate effectively around a kitchen table in a small office in the home. But we support over 100 families worldwide today. We are the only patient organisation for this condition globally. So we have families that contact us from all corners of the globe, from all over the UK, across Europe, right across to Australia and the US and South America even. And the power of the internet is incredible, because we have Facebook groups and Facebook page, as well as a website. So people will find us one way or another. And even those that cannot speak English even as a second language, will try to contact us, and we just use Google Translate to try and understand each other and help each other. Which, when you're so isolated and there's no one else to help you, is hugely beneficial.
You support about 100 families, and that it's truly an ultra rare disorder. Do you have any estimates? I mean, I know I've heard you speak before at one of our events, and you suspect that the condition is actually underdiagnosed. Do you have any clue as to how many families there might be worldwide that are affected by R20?
So according to medical literature, the most recent literature reviews have cited that there are around 150 cases of Ring20 worldwide. That suggests, given the number of families that are in contact with us, and those are only the families that choose to connect and find a patient organisation, and the locations of those families, suggests that not only is the disease very underreported in medical literature, it's very underdiagnosed, and we perceive it's very underdiagnosed because it's very difficult to diagnose Ring Chromosome 20 syndrome, and most diagnoses, according to our families, and as we heard in my specific case for my son, happen by chance. They're not a deliberate attempt to look for Ring Chromosome 20 syndrome. So there are over 130 rare and complex epilepsies, so there are very, very many of them. And most genetic epilepsies are attempted to be diagnosed by running standard gene panel testing. So exome sequencing, whole genome sequencing, or CGH array is often used. Now, these sorts of techniques, and you know way more about this than I do, are looking for duplications and deletions and additions, changes in the DNA. Unfortunately, at this particular stage, they cannot detect a ring chromosome, so a chromosome that is formed from a linear form, and the two ends are joined together to form a ring. And you have to actually go back to an older form of testing, which is less routinely used these days, particularly in Western medicine, which is karyotyping, typically used for detecting chromosome disorders historically. But because, as in my son's case, and this is quite typical of the signs and symptoms of Ring20, the disease doesn't present at birth, as many chromosome disorders do, there's no reason to suspect a chromosome disorder. Very, very typically, these children, they're born perfectly normally, they physically look like any other baby or normal child, they reach all of the childhood milestones at the appropriate stages. There's absolutely no reason to suspect there's anything wrong with them in their first few years of life. And they're somewhere between the ages of typically 4 to 10 years, although some children are younger and some have been older. They will start with this very sudden and severe onset of seizures, and that's when the disease shows its true colours, I guess.
How long did it take you to become an expert in this? I mean, it's so if we go back to when your son was diagnosed, I know my understanding is you're actually still working as a business analyst, so you have a entirely separate career from your work as part of the charity. What made you decide to actually dive headlong into this as essentially a second career? You've been retrained as a scientist in some respect.
Yeah, I guess that's quite flattering to kind of hear it in that sense. But it's that yearning as a parent to want to understand what's actually happening to your child, and when you're talking to your child's doctors and they can't explain it to you, right. Or the nurses the epilepsy nurses that you're seeing, and you look on the internet and the information isn't there, I guess I'm just a very inquisitive nature, as you say. I'm a business analyst by profession, so I have a very logical mind, and I like to step my way through a problem to try and find the answers. And I guess that approach has moved into my voluntary work, and it's as much my voluntary work, but it's also about trying to understand what's happening to my son and then try to solve that problem, to see, oh, is there any information out there that could help him and others that are suffering in the same way that he is. I do feel that I can't stop until I've exhausted a number of avenues, really, because it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like you must imagine that if you don't do it, then who will, right? To some extent, there's, as you say, there's thousands of rare and ultra rare disorders, and it's very challenging for the healthcare system to understand everything. So if you feel like you go to see your doctor and they've seen dozens of other people that day and they can't, they just aren't able to go as deep as you might be able to, right? And you have such a motivation to do it.
Yeah, that's really it. It's, you have such limited time when you go to see the doctor or the specialist, and you have so many questions as a parent with a child, or even an adult that's diagnosed with a really rare disease, and they have such limited time with you, and they will focus on treating your symptoms because that's their primary care aim, is to try and make you better in some way. So they will focus on the treatments, the drugs that they might want to give you, the medicines, the tests that need to be done. They don't have time to explain what's happening in terms of the disease. And so you have to go and find that out for yourself. And really, when you've got a really ultra rare disease, when you're talking to the doctor, and the doctor doesn't actually know much more than you do, in actual fact, once you become an expert patient, you can get to a situation where you actually know more than the doctor that's treating your child in terms of the condition that you're dealing with, because you've read all the medical literature. Right. Your pediatrician, your pediatric neurologist, your neurologist will not have read every medical article on Ring Chromosome 20 because they won't have had time to do that. So, if you've got an analytical mind, you can start to understand and assimilate that information and kind of work through the findings. And then the best situation for families that I would suggest from my own experience is to build that relationship with your healthcare professionals that are treating you, and to work together in trying to solve the problem. In these situations, the doctors won't have all the answers, and that's okay. Yeah. I think we all set doctors up to be absolute gods, and we have to kind of remember that they're human beings just like we are, and with 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 rare diseases, we can't expect them to know everything about every single condition that may come across their table. So I think on both sides we have to accept that they won't have all the answers, and it's okay for them to tell us that, and we will not think any less of them. Right. Because they don't have all that information at their fingertips, and they don't have the answer about, well, take this pill and that will make you better. But what we really appreciate as families, I think, is the doctor saying, okay, I'm not sure about that, or I don't have that information, but I'll try and find out for you. Right. And I think a doctor that's willing to either try and find out, or to work with you, or to discuss with you, well, we could try this treatment, or we could try that treatment. These are the pros and cons, or the side effects, potential benefits, but this is what might not work. And you talk about it together, and you work through it together based on your own situation, because in many of these cases, your own situation is quite unique. And with something as rare as Ring 20, you're likely to be the only case that your doctor has ever seen in their history and will probably ever see in their lifetime. So, you know, it's a collaborative thing.
And I guess one of the, you mentioned the power of the internet earlier, and also the, you know, groups like yours. The amazing thing that you can do is bring families together to share that information, whether it's digitally, or my understanding is you're working on a physical real world event as well, but to actually get families in the same room to say, oh yeah, my son had the same experience, or my experience was different. Like you said earlier, the fact that your son was prescribed steroids and it had a dramatic and really positive effect, that's you know, that's potentially a really important piece of information for another family, you know, to share, whether it's online or through in-person events.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is so vitally important to connect with other families for that mutual support. And there's only so much that you can do through emails and phone calls. So we've been raising some funds to bring together a workshop in November in Birmingham. And we are hoping that as many of our families that can travel to attend, because all of them will be many, many miles away from wherever we host a workshop. But the idea, the purpose behind the workshop is to create some patient information literature. So alongside bringing those families together so they can share their experiences and they can talk to each other and actually see that their child does the same as your child when they're having these children typically have multiple seizures daily. So they will have seizures during this workshop, but it's an okay and a very safe environment. And when you see that they're having the same types of seizures, then you really can feel that you're not alone, and that's really, really important. But the big purpose of the workshop, as I said, was to create a patient information booklet, because that just doesn't exist for Ring 20. So we provide a lot of information on our website. We signpost to lots of medical literature or research articles or any information about the disease, and try to share as much on social media. But what our families say to us is, when they're first diagnosed, they're given very little, if any, information on the condition. They don't know what to expect. They don't understand what the diagnosis means. They don't know how their child's going to be treated. They don't know how to best care and manage their child, what's safe, what's, but also thinking about the can-do attitude and not being an overprotective parent and stopping your child, or as they grow into adults, you know, stopping them having an independent life and allowing them, alongside having daily seizures or multiple seizures per week, very debilitating disease, but actually letting them have a true quality of life and getting out there and having friends and socializing and getting involved in sports and activities. It's about what you can do if you do it safely with the right support, and how and where you can get support, and why that's really, really important to get that support network around you, whether that's emotional, financial support. So we want to create this booklet and to create a really fun atmosphere for our parents. We're going to do it in comic book style.
Oh, great.
So we're sharing an idea that's been brought to us by some other rare disease charities who've used this before, and it's found to be really, really powerful. So we're bringing along a comic illustrator who will bring to life all our families' ideas. So this will be an information booklet created by families, for families. They will create the content. We will have some healthcare professionals on site to answer any sort of slightly medical questions so that we don't provide any inaccuracies. Yeah. But we're not there to advise. You know, it's about day-to-day life living with the Ring 20 and what to expect. And all those ideas will be brought to life with illustrations. And what we will do post the workshop is to create a project for our young adults who will come together and they will help edit the final booklet and decide what actually goes into it and how it comes together. And then we will hope to publish and print the booklets and give them out to all of our existing families to share, and for new families as well. And we really do need this to be in print format because it needs to be a coffee table booklet, if you like.
Right.
It needs to be something that can be picked up and shared. People need to be able to say, hey, what's that? That looks really interesting. And they can learn about Ring 20. So that might be other people within the family, carers, schools, friends.
They can take it to show their doctor, right?
And show their doctors as well, because their doctors won't understand any of this. And this will be made from anecdotal evidence from families who are living with this disease day to day. So
that's
it's
great.
got to be right.
So how many families are you expecting to attend? Do you have a rough estimate?
Well, we would love to have something like 15 or so families to attend, which with the sort of numbers that we have, over 100 worldwide, but we're actually only supporting something like about 30 of those families in the UK. Now, this will be open to families outside of the UK, and some of those just across the water in Europe. It's just as easy and cheap to get a flight across. So we're hoping some of those will pop over and come and see us as well.
We'll definitely share out the fundraising information because, I think in terms of the kind of impact that a donation can have, this is a life-changing kind of thing for the families that attend, and also there's a ripple effect of the creation of the book that is going to help, as you say, educate friends, educate other family, educate someone's healthcare professionals that they work with. So I think I'm sure there are people out there that would want to help support to, if it's flights or trains or even accommodation. It's a 2-day event. Is that right? We will definitely share it out.
Yeah. So we're doing, yeah, because there is no way we could have a 1-day or a half-day event because our families just, it would take them too long to travel to the venue. So we are having to look at accommodating them overnight and any help towards enabling some of those families to travel and to attend, particularly those that might be more financially challenged. And some of these families, their children can be quite disabled. I'm very lucky that my son is, even though he has several seizures per day, we've got quite a good support network, and so I am able to work. But some of our families have had to give up work to look after, to care for their child 24/7 because of the condition and the level of support that they require, and therefore financially it might be quite difficult for them to come for an overnight stay and to travel. So they're the ones that would most benefit, really.
What does your son do? What's he's 17? 18?
He's 22 now.
22 now. Wow.
Yeah.
So is he's able to work and?
Well, no, he's still at college at this stage. He's still studying. He's studying animation.
Oh, great.
Right into some fun stuff. But he's been staying in education for a number of years because it has proven quite challenging for him to try to find employment. When he's attempted to make applications for jobs and even got to an interview stage, when the employers have actually found out about his epilepsy and that he does have daily seizures, in many cases they have said that they have been unable to take on the risk of supporting him. And even though he's quite capable of doing some work, and he absolutely wants to work in the future, it is going to be quite a challenge that we're going to have to work together to try and find an employer that would be able to put appropriate support in place to accommodate David's needs and to allow him to contribute to society, which is absolutely what he wants to do. And he absolutely doesn't want to sit at home and have nothing to do every day. He needs a purpose in life, and he wants to eventually live more independently away from us. But that will have to be in supported living, because he does have seizures at night, and they are occasionally tonic-clonic, which runs a high risk of SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. So you cannot leave somebody alone in that situation. But he wants his own life, and we will do everything to try and help him achieve that goal.
Of course, yeah. It doesn't seem right with the employment thing. It feels like that shouldn't be a barrier, especially for talented young person who wants to work and is willing to work.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, speaking to the many families that I do affected by Ring 20 and other rare epilepsies, or I say rare epilepsies, where the epilepsies are not controlled and the seizures are quite frequent. This is a very common situation for those young adults who really, really want to work and really would love to put their talents to best use, and could be the greatest assets to some employers, because they will probably be some of the most hardworking and diligent young people that you could probably employ, because they want to work and they want to prove that what they can do and show you what they can do. But unfortunately, it's very, very challenging in today's society, when there are maybe 50 or 100 people going for the same job, for employers to take on the risk, and in terms of then mitigating that risk, they then have to put maybe additional support in place, which may cost them financially, and they're not willing to necessarily do that for somebody who has a physical disability such as seizures, when they could employ somebody for whom they don't have to provide that level of support. And that's a very sad reflection on society today. And I would love to speak to employers to help change their perception on what some of these young people can contribute.
Wondering, in addition to your work on Ring 20, you're also very involved with the European Reference Network patient advisory group focused around rare epilepsies. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that and the importance of these kind of organizations for patients with rare diseases across Europe.
So about 2.5 years ago, for those people that don't know, 24 European Reference Networks, or ERNs as they're known for short, were created for different groupings of the different rare disease conditions, of which one of those groups is EpiCARE, which is the ERN for rare and complex epilepsies.
It should be broken up into different groups, right? Because there's so many different challenges, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And EpiCARE was evolved because there are 130 plus rare and complex epilepsies defined at this point in time. And whilst epilepsy is considered to be a common condition, it's actually many, many diseases. It's a bit like saying cancer is one condition, and it's not. It's many, many different diseases. So if we think about it in that way, the rare and complex epilepsies are about 1/3 of the people in the world who have epilepsy who have a very difficult to treat symptoms, and also they'll have other symptoms other than just seizures. So while seizures will be the key symptom to their disease, they may experience many other different types of symptoms, very typically around learning and behaviour difficulties, but can be associated with all other types of what we call comorbidities. So I was asked to join the patient advocacy group as part of EpiCARE. So as patient advocates, or the EPAG groups, European Patient Advocacy Groups, we are asked to join as equal partners alongside the healthcare professionals and researchers that bring these reference networks together. And we're there to provide the patient perspective, the patient voice to the work that they're doing. Ultimately, the reference networks are there for the benefit of the patients that they serve. They're there to improve understanding across the healthcare profession, across Europe, for these really rare diseases. Given the rarity and the scarcity of patients, the knowledge doesn't always exist at your local hospital or even within your own country. The specialist expertise to diagnose or treat or manage your disease may be in a completely different European country. And European reference networks provide the vehicle to allow that knowledge to travel rather than the patient having to travel.
Right, and it's so essential, right? Because if you're if the expertise is in the United Kingdom, for instance, but the patient is in Finland or is in Italy or wherever the expert is not, then it's essential to not have to travel across borders or for the doctors to have to set up clinics in different places. We can share this information across the network.
It's a much more cost-effective model, and is also much more efficient and effective for both the patients and the doctors themselves. They utilise something called CPMS, which is Clinical Patient Management Systems, whereby they can have virtual consultations between different doctors in different countries who might be specialists in a particular disease, when they can discuss cases and provide guidance to the local doctors or the local hospitals treating that patient. So that's really important. And it also creates borders without boundaries. This is another phrase of the ERNs, is that it doesn't matter which country you live in or how financially rich that country might be, or whether you would get the best treatment in your country or you can afford to see the best doctors. Everybody should have equal access to healthcare, the best healthcare that they can. And with ERNs, we're moving towards creating that bit more level equality of ensuring that patient comes to some of the poorer countries as well as those that have more provision available.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's such an important mission, isn't it? We've made a lot of progress, it seems like, in research in rare disease, and there are quite a few breakthrough treatments, but if these don't make it to everyone in the world, then it's really a missed opportunity, right? We'd hate to change the system for the better, but then have it only actually help the top 10% of people that happen to be born in the right place.
Yeah, research is there to be shared, and I know that's not always historically what appears to happen, but in the really rare diseases and in the rare disease community, it's absolutely imperative that research information is shared, because the best knowledge may be spread across Europe or even across the world, and the best minds can come together to take things forward and take the next steps. And one doctor or one researcher in one country may hear about a particular disease or a particular scenario, and that may trigger a thought process, and they may have a new treatment that they've been looking at that might be appropriate, or some new diagnostic testing that they have available within their centre that's not available elsewhere because it's state-of-the-art new technology, those sorts of things. And it's providing access to the best resources, whether that's people, whether that's equipment, whether that's knowledge, and getting that across to the patients. But coming back to the whole sort of EPAG and our contribution to the reference networks, the doctors who set up EpiCARE devised a structure by which they would devise the work that would be undertaken, and they devised it into therapeutic and diagnostic modules that they would look at in different ways. And so they have different themes. So, because we're associated with epilepsy, there's the sort of genetic diagnosis, there's looking at EEGs and MRIs and psychology. And then we have treatments looking for targeted medical therapies, dietary treatments, and also looking at research and clinical trials that can perhaps be undertaken in wider groups of rare epilepsies rather than specific diseases, which is typically what happens with research and clinical trials, that you focus on a single disease. Now, where this, in terms of patient benefit, that can be really incredibly powerful for the really ultra rare diseases, and also help the more common rare diseases as well, because we can all share in the funding and the knowledge of trying to create new research that's more joined up, that could potentially benefit a wider patient community by looking at a wider cohort of patients that share in similar symptoms but maybe have slightly different underlying disease diagnoses.
Absolutely.
But you could still find potentially a treatment that could benefit all of those, and that's quite a novel approach. But from a patient perspective, many patients and families would want that, because they potentially could see more significant and faster advances in medicine, and improvements
together, right?
Yeah, and it's ultimately, I don't think any of us are really looking up for a cure. We would all love to have a cure, but I think we're realistic enough to know that that's a great strategic goal, but that's huge. But we would like to find better treatment that allows the individuals to lead the best lives that they can, to have the best health without all of the side effects of treatments and different medications. If they can improve that and improve overall quality of life, then that has to be what's the ultimate benefit of patients. So
it's such an important role of the patient advisory groups, right? Because sometimes, as a scientist, you can get lost in the details, and without having the grounding of the actual patient that your research is focused on, to say these are the most important problems to us, and as you say, cure is a big decades-long challenge. And so, what can we be doing in the meantime to work our way closer?
Yeah, we work as our EPAD patient advocacy group. We work alongside the doctors as equal partners. We work alongside their work packages. We contribute to ideas and suggestions. We even have created our own ideas and suggestions. So we're now working to create patient information leaflets for healthcare professionals, working alongside the doctors on that, as well as a new initiative. We're looking to introduce some educational webinars, and we will be working very much in collaboration. There will be some very medical related topic areas, but there will also be topic areas and themes that will relate to patients and families. That's really key and useful information that's not currently in the public domain. There's a lot of information on epilepsy generally and how to manage your epilepsy. But when you're talking about somebody with a very complex epilepsy and very complex condition, there are perhaps more factors that you have to consider, and further sort of safety aspects that are perhaps more heightened and need closer attention. And as patient advocates, we can bring the experience, because many of us are leaders of patient associations across Europe for different rare epilepsies, like myself, and a couple of the ladies within our group are also patients themselves. So we have huge experience and knowledge of living with these conditions and what actually affects patients and families, and what we also have the information from our community, wider community, about what the community believes would make their lives better. So we try to bring that to the table, and work with the doctors to see whether we can achieve something along those lines.
Yeah, it has to be together, doesn't it? Without all the pieces in place, it can't be done. Well, look, I just think it's incredible the amount you've been able to accomplish in 5 years, and hopefully we'll share out information about some of the fundraising opportunities with Ring 20, and also more information about the work you've done as part of the ERN. So just like to say thanks it's been a really great conversation. Hopefully everyone listening has learned about a new condition that they might not have heard of before, and also some of the challenges with ultra rare diseases in general. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick.